Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we are returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first roll, we get an Assassin's Fat Man with bashing damage increased by 50% and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Assassin's effect is, if you're primarily a PvE player, not PvP, then it's really not that useful because most of the human enemies in this game are already pretty squishy, and you don't typically need a whole lot of extra damage beyond the legendary effect, or beyond a non-legendary weapon to put them down pretty quickly. So it's not particularly useful there, although if you're a PvP player, I could see it being very useful because you're generally going to want to be running around at full health for PvP, I would expect anyway, is my understanding. And since I'm not a huge PvP player, and getting that extra plus 50% damage against your enemies all the time when you're in PvP would be very useful for that. I don't think the Fat Man is really the kind of weapon that you're going to want to be using in PvP because of the damage cap that... I do know that there's a damage cap. I think it's like 100 or 150. Don't quote me on that because I'm not a heavy PvP player, so I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that it's relatively low, so this thing would definitely hit that cap and you wouldn't get a lot of extra damage out of it. You'd be much better off with something that could fire much faster, I believe. The second star, bashing damage increased by 50%, is really just a bad star in pretty much every case except for the minigun if you're going to be putting the shredder mod on it and using it as a melee weapon. In that case, it's actually a very good second star, but the rest of the time it is just not doing a whole lot for you because bashing damage doesn't do a whole lot of damage in this game with most weapons, so increasing that not a whole lot of damage by 50% is still not giving you a whole lot of damage. And then 25% less VATS AP cost. That could be kind of useful on this weapon. It's definitely one of my favorite third stars overall, but this is the kind of weapon that if you drop out of VATS between shots while you're reloading, then you're probably not going to be burning up your AP that quickly anyway if you've got a half-decent build designed around having high AP, so I think it's kind of lost on this weapon, so this one is pretty much a dud overall. Let's go on ahead and see what we get for the next one. And here we've got a Juggernaut short gamma gun with replenishing action points with each kill and 15% faster reload. So the Juggernaut's effect is kind of the opposite of the Bloodied effect, but unfortunately it's not nearly as good. It gives a maximum of 25% damage bonus at 100% health, but it's actually harder than you might think to stay at 100% health all the time. Even just a few rads can knock you off of that and reduce the damage bonus from it. So it's the kind of effect that if you're a full health build, it's not really costing you much because you're probably going to be trying to keep your health high anyway, but at the same time, I just believe even if you're a full health build, there are definitely better first stars out there, such as aristocrats or junkies or anti-armor, so, or even quad depending on the weapon. So just really not excited by the Juggernaut's effect. The replenishing action points with each kill can be very useful if you are a very VATS heavy build and you find yourself frequently running out of AP in combat. Then getting some extra AP with your kills could definitely help keep that from happening. So definitely a good second star, not the best in my opinion, but not a bad one by any means. And then the 15% faster reload, I'm a little torn on because I really like being able to reload a weapon faster, but it does seem to be a pretty much negligible difference if you've already got the speed demon mutations. So thank you for pointing that out to me. I apologize, I can't remember your YouTube handle, but one of my viewers commented on one of my previous videos and pointed that out to me, so thank you for that. I was not aware of that at the time, but that does seem to be the case from my testing. There is a little bit of difference. Like, it's not that it doesn't do anything from what I've seen, but it's not a lot. So if you're running the speed demon mutation, which I think most endgame players probably are, then it's not going to be doing a whole lot for you. So overall, this one is pretty middling. The Gamma Gun's not really the kind of weapon that you typically would run around with as your main weapon anyway. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one and see what else we get. This one is kind of interesting. We've got a two-shot short plasma pistol with the 25% faster fire rate and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the two-shot effect I'm not generally a fan of because, for one thing, it adds 25% damage to the base damage of the weapon, but it divides that damage between two rounds so that each round is only doing 62.5 or whatever percent damage of the base or of the damage you see on the damage card there, and that forces you to get through the armor twice, which, at least in some cases, I imagine could end up being less damage than if you didn't have that effect, if it was just a non-legendary version of the weapon. Although on lower armored enemies, then that won't be an issue. The 25% faster fire rate. One other thing about the two-shot effect that I forgot to mention is that it also imposes a significant accuracy penalty, in addition to the other penalties that I mentioned there, or drawback that I mentioned there. So, really, it's a first star that I'm not at all excited about, unless it's paired with explosive, which you will not find on the plasma pistol or rifle unless it's a hacked weapon. So the 25% faster fire rate is a very good effect on pretty much any weapon that is fully automatic or can be made to be fully automatic, and this weapon can be, so you can definitely put out a lot of shots, especially with the two-shot effect, but I still think you'd be much better off with a better first star like Anti-Armor, Bloodied, Aristocrats, Junkies, even Quad. Anything along those lines would be much better than the two-shot first star there. The plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, that could be pretty good if you are the type of player who likes to aim down the sights a lot. With a weapon like this, I would typically use it in VAT, but, you know, I'm certainly not the only player in the game. I'm sure there are players out there who would prefer to use a weapon like this by aiming down the sights, and if you are, then getting some extra damage resistance while doing so is not a bad thing by any means. If you've got some decent armor in the range of 300 to 400 damage resistance, then you're not going to get a huge benefit from this because you'll be hitting the point of diminishing returns, but you will still see some benefit from it. But overall, this one is, again, pretty mediocre, kind of on the low side of mediocre. So let's try it again here and see what else we can get. And here we got something else that's not that great. An Exterminator short radium rifle with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Exterminator's effect is, I don't know, probably the worst of the Slayer's effects in my opinion, simply because there's just not a lot of times that you're going to be going out of your way to be hunting down Mirelurks or bugs. Sure, there's the Swarm of Suitors event, and you might be trying to get some Mirelurk meat for the Ohio River Adventures if you're still trying to grind out Raider rep, but even if that's the case, I don't know that it's really worth keeping a weapon around specifically for those times. I think you're better off just having a good general weapon and using that in those situations. And unfortunately, unlike the Hunter's effect, there's really no other enemy that you're likely to be hunting down, at least on a somewhat regular basis, such as Scorch Beast, that the Exterminator's effect actually works on. So basically, it's a dud first star there. The second star, bashing damage increased by 50%. Well, we talked about that earlier. It's basically a dud here because this is not a minigun, so the third star, plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. In theory, that's a good thing because being able to get some extra protection while you are reloading and presumably vulnerable because you can't be attacking while you're reloading sounds like a good thing, but at the same time, as I said before, if you've got in the 300 to 400 damage resistance rating for your armor already, then the benefit from this is going to be not nothing, but definitely a lot less than what you might expect it to be. Not to mention that it only applies to damage resistance, not energy resistance or anything else. So overall, I'm considering this one pretty much a full-on dud. Let's go on ahead and see if maybe we can get something good this time. Okay, well, we got a good first star, and then we've got Bloodied Short Flamer with the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So, in my opinion, the Bloodied is typically the best first star for most weapons. There's a few that I prefer something other than that, like I prefer Quad for the first star for a Tesla rifle or a railway rifle, for example, but most weapons, in my opinion, because I'm a low health build, I like Bloodied as the first star. So that's great. It's perfect first star in my opinion. But the second star, the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, is basically just crap. It has basically, first of all, you have to actually empty out the magazine before you will see any benefit from it whatsoever. And on a weapon like this, that's not a core-based weapon, like a plasma core or a fusion core as its ammo, then you're able to reload it between battles with no difficulty, and it has a pretty decent size magazine. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but I do remember it being fairly sizable. So typically I'm not going to fire the last round in the magazine on a flamer, so if I never do that, then I'm never going to get that benefit from it. So basically, yeah, that second star is just a dud, even on low ammo capacity weapons. The third star, plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. Talked about that a little bit on the last weapon. It still pretty much applies here, and even more so because this is the kind of weapon that I'll mostly be reloading outside of combat. So if I'm not in combat, then that third star is really not doing anything for me at all. So overall, I'd call this one something that somebody could use, in the mid-levels while you're still trying to get your hands on something better, because the first star is very good, but definitely not a god roll or anything close to it. So let's try again and see if we can get something good. Well, this is not it. We've got a Ghoul Slayer short Gatling gun with plus 50% limb damage and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Ghoul Slayer's effect is, in my opinion, one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects, just because ghouls are typically pretty squishy and go down pretty easily with a non-legendary weapon, so I don't see where it's really worth keeping a weapon around specifically to deal with them. I could see maybe keeping something around if it had like the 90% weight reduction third star for radiation rumble or that sort of situation, but overall I just don't see it being worthwhile there. The plus 50 damage, plus 50% limb damage second star is pretty unexciting as well. I really believe that if you want to cripple an enemy, you're better off running the perks that give you a chance to cripple it and crippling them that way. And really, I think you're going to get your best benefit with that second star on a a faster firing weapon that does less damage per shot. As far as fully automatic weapons go, the Gatling gun is pretty slow firing and pretty high damage per shot as far as, base damage and things like that go. So you're not really going to get your best benefit there. And then the plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, that is a decent effect on this weapon. I probably wouldn't get much benefit from it just because I've got decent armor in the 300 to 400 range of damage resistance, but if you don't, then you'll get some decent benefit from it if you're aiming down the sights, which I typically do with my heavy guns like this. So that's probably the best star on this weapon in my opinion, which makes this one basically a dud as well. So let's try it again here. Oh man, if we could have combined the first star from the other one with the second and third star from this one, we would have had a much, much better weapon. But here we've got a Zealot's short flamer with 25% faster fire rate and 15% faster reload. So the Zealot's effect is, in theory, it wouldn't be that useful as a first star because the Scorched are generally pretty squishy, just like the ghouls, and will go down pretty easily with even a non-legendary weapon. But the Zealot's effect does work on Scorch Beasts and the Scorch Beast Queen and other Scorched enemies that have been scorched by Scorch Beasts or whatever as well. So that is a good thing, and you can get some utility out of it that way, whereas, things like the Ghoul Slayers and Exterminators, you're not going to really be getting any benefit from it in those situations. So it's not as useless as some of them, but still definitely not the first star that I want. The 25% faster fire rate is very, very good on this weapon. It's just straight up going to increase its damage per second, so that's very good. That's why I was saying that if we could combine the second star with this weapon with the first star from the other Bloodied Flamer, we would have a very, very solid roll at that point. But unfortunately, that is not what Murmur gave us here. So definitely the 25% faster fire rate does make this weapon at least mediocre, though, because I could see somebody using this weapon just because of that second star until they get their hands on something better. The 15% faster reload, talked about that a little bit earlier. You know, it's not a terrible thing, but it's just not as good as I used to think that it was. So there's definitely things I'd rather see there, like probably 90% weight reduction on a flamer would be ideal, but overall, this one, like I say, is pretty mediocre. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Mutant's Bow with plus 25% damage while aiming and plus 1 perception. So the Mutant's effect, it's better than it used to be, and I do feel like most endgame players are probably going to have 5 mutations by the time you're running Marsupial, Speed Demon, probably either Herbivore or Carnivore, and a couple of other mutations that are particularly well suited to your build. So getting the 25% damage bonus, which is from 5 mutations at 5% bonus per mutation, is basically a free roll, but at the same time, that's just not much of a damage bonus because it is additive, so it's just 25% of the base damage of the weapon. The plus 25% damage while aiming, that's a solid effect. I mean, it's just free damage for aiming down the sights. If you are the type of player who would use the bow by aiming down sights primarily, then that's just free damage for you. This weapon I would probably use primarily in VATS, so I probably would not get that much out of it, but I do know there's a lot of players out there who would. So the plus 1 perception, unfortunately, does not synergize so well with the second star because its primary benefit is better VATS accuracy, so yeah, it kind of doesn't synergize well, but, you know, I don't think anybody's really going to complain about getting an extra point on really any of their specials, but it's just not doing a whole lot for us. If you are into using the bows, this might be an okay weapon just because of that second star if you're not into using VATS with them, but overall, this one's pretty much a dud as well. So we got 2 more rolls. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got another flamer, Berserker's short flamer, with bashing damage increased by 50% and 15% faster reload. So by far, this one is the worst of the 3 that we've seen today. The Berserker's effect is better than it used to be because you don't get a debuff for the weapon when you have armor protector, or damage resistance rather, but at the same time, I just don't think it's that good. You can break your legendary armor. It was pointed out to me, and I had totally forgotten about that. I did know at one point, but it's not something I think about regularly. But it was pointed out to me in the comment section of one of my videos that you can break your legendary armor and not get the damage resistance benefits from that armor because it's broken, but still benefit from the legendary effects of it. And that is definitely a way you could do the Berserker's build effectively. You might even be able to get some half-decent protection by using something like a full set of Overeaters, because I don't believe that the damage prevention percentage like that will affect the Berserker's effect. But overall, I still think that the Berserker's effect needs more love and supporting stuff like perks or mutations or chems or something to make it better than the other builds that are in the game. The bashing damage increased by 50%. Well, we've already talked about that. This is not a minigun, so we're going to move on. The 15% faster reload, we also talked about that. So, and we talked about it on a flamer. So basically everything I said about it there applies here. So this one is pretty much a dud in my opinion. Let's go on ahead and see what we get for our last roll. Come on, something good, Murmur. Nope, not something good. We got a Mutant's Broadsider with replenishing action points with each kill, and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we talked about the Mutant's effect, and pretty much everything we said there applies here. The replenishing action points with each kill, this might be a weapon that you might benefit from somewhat with that, even though it is a heavy weapon. You can put a mod on it that gives you, I believe, 4 cannonballs that in the magazine before you have to reload, so you're not having to reload every single time, which means that you might actually be able to use up your AP, so being able to get some extra AP from the kills and keep yourself using this weapon in VATS if you chose to wouldn't be necessarily the worst thing ever. Although the first star would probably be better off with something a little more useful than mutants if you were looking to do that with this particular weapon. And then the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, well, it does synergize very well with that second star. And if you were going with the full health build, then that would definitely get you some extra VATS criticals, and possibly even if you're going with the low health build. But overall, I would consider this one a dud too. So, yeah, I don't think we really got much of anything that was very good. This is probably the best roll we got of the day, so that's unfortunate, but that is the way it goes with the Purveyor sometimes. We'll try again next week. So remember, if you enjoyed my content, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.